At my birthday brunch, my grandfather lifted his glass and smiled. Then he asked about the apartment he bought me. I whispered, "I live in a basement." My dad's fork hit the plate. The room went silent. My grandfather was mid-toast when the word apartment left his mouth, and my entire life detonated quietly onto a white tablecloth in the middle of a Sunday brunch. He was smiling, that real smile of his, the one that crinkled the outer corners of his eyes in a way no one else in our family could imitate because no one else in our family smiled like they meant it. He had driven 3 hours that morning to be here. His glass was raised. The crystal caught the light from the chandelier above our table and sent a small rainbow skimming across the starched linen. "To Emma," he said warmly, standing on her own 2 feet, making her way in the world. He paused, his eyes finding mine across the table with the kind of uncomplicated pride I had spent years trying to earn from the wrong people. "And I'm so glad you love the apartment I got you, sweetheart." My hand stopped, literally stopped, halfway to my mouth with a glass of water, frozen in space, 3 drops spilling cold and slow over my knuckles. The restaurant sound faded. Silverware from other tables became distant. My sister Chloe's thumb halted over her phone screen. My mother's hand hovered near her coffee cup like a paused frame in a film. Then came the sound that I will hear for the rest of my life. My father's fork, heavy and silver, slipping from his fingers and clattering onto his plate with a sharp metallic crack that cut through the silence like a gunshot in a church. I set my water glass down carefully. My hand was barely shaking. I noticed this the way you notice something clinical about yourself when your brain hasn't caught up yet to what your body already knows. I looked at my grandfather. His smile had shifted into gentle confusion. I looked at my father. He was staring at his plate, not at me, at his plate. And in that fraction of a second, I understood everything. "What apartment?" I whispered. "My name is Emma Reed. I'm 27 years old, and on most days I feel closer to 40. The specific kind of 40 that comes not from age, but from carrying weight that was never supposed to be yours. 4 years earlier, I had graduated from college with a degree in interior design and approximately $340 in my checking account, a portfolio I believed in, and a father whose confidence I had mistaken for love. I moved back home for exactly 1 month before the atmosphere became thick enough to choke on. The real world is waiting, Emma," my father, Daniel Reed, would say over dinner in the patient, measured tone of someone delivering wisdom rather than eviction. He was good-looking in a way that photographed well, broad-shouldered, perpetually tanned from weekend golf, the kind of man other fathers introduced themselves to first at school events. He had the voice of someone accustomed to being agreed with. "Your mother and I are not a safety net. You need to learn responsibility." I believed him. That's the part I return to most often now, when I'm trying to understand how it went on so long. I believed him because he was my father, and the foundation of your understanding of the world is built on what your parents tell you is true. I had no reason to question it. He said I needed to make my own way, so I made my own way. I found the basement room through a listing on Craigslist, $600 per month, utilities included, cash only, owned by a 72-year-old woman named Mrs. Gable, who chain-smoked Virginia Slims on her porch and kept a collection of ceramic owls in every room as if they were keeping watch. The smoke seeped through the floorboards. Everything I owned smelled faintly of it within 2 weeks. There were no windows. The nearest thing to natural light was a small egress opening near the ceiling that faced a concrete wall. My closest companion was the boiler, a massive, ancient, groaning thing that lived on the other side of a thin wall from my mattress and shuddered to life at irregular hours like a large animal shifting in its sleep. I named it Gerald, not with affection, more the way you name something that scares you a little, as if giving it a name makes it smaller. I got a job cleaning offices, 5 a.m. to noon, scrubbing toilets and emptying waste bins in gleaming corporate buildings where people in expensive shoes arrived just as I was leaving, smelling of bleach and exhaustion. I would pass them in the lobby, these strangers in their pressed suits, and I would nod, and they would look through me the way you look through furniture. Afternoons I slept for 2 hours. Then I waitressed evenings at a family restaurant called the Corner Bistro, misspelled as bistro on the sign, which the owner claimed was intentional for branding purposes. I carried plates and smiled at people and came home after midnight with aching feet and crumpled tip money that I smoothed out and organized on my kitchen table, which was a card table I'd found at a garage sale for $3. Every few months, when the exhaustion turned into something more corrosive, I would call my father. One night, about a year in, I sat on the edge of my mattress with a student loan statement in my hand and called him. The boiler was groaning on the other side of the wall. I had just calculated that my 2 jobs, combined, left me approximately $60 at the end of every month after rent, utilities, food, and the minimum loan payment. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking around the edges, "I was just wondering if you know anyone who's hiring. Even for an internship, I'd do anything." I could hear the television behind him, the particular sound of his comfortable life. "Emma, we've talked about this," he said, his voice wrapped in that patient disappointment he wore so naturally. "No one is going to hand you anything. You have to earn it. If you're not making enough, get a 3rd job. Flip burgers if you have to." He paused. "It builds character." I said, "Okay." I hung up. I did not cry. I had learned early that crying didn't pay the rent. What I didn't know, what I could not have imagined, was that 3 weeks before I graduated college, my grandfather Arthur had wired $70,000 to my father's personal bank account with a single memo line for Emma's condo purchase, and my father had deposited it, and 5 days later, he had moved it. Every single dollar. into his own private investment account. And then he had called me and told me I needed to learn responsibility and suggested I flip burgers for character. I didn't know any of this. For 4 years, I knew nothing about it until my grandfather raised his glass. "The apartment, honey," my grandfather said again, his smile faltering now into something uncertain. He looked at my father. "The one on Elm Street, Daniel. I bought it for Emma. You handled the paperwork. You told me she moved in right after graduation." Every head at the table moved in the same direction, like a weather vane catching new wind, to my father. He was still looking at his plate. The dining room of the gilded spoon, polished wood, pressed linens, waiters trained to be invisible, had become a very different room. The ambient noise of other people's contentment seemed to recede until our table existed in a separate kind of quiet. My mother spoke first, her voice tissue thin. "Daniel, what is he talking about?" My father raised his head. He had the look of a man assembling something quickly from whatever materials were nearby. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved across faces, mine, my grandfather's, back to his plate, then up again, with the efficiency of someone calculating exits. "It was an investment," he said. The casual tone he reached for didn't come. What arrived instead was something strained and slightly elevated, like a man speaking at a pitch intended to project calm. "The market wasn't right when you sent the funds, Dad. I was holding it for her. I meant to sort it out later." "No," I said. The word came out of me the way something does when it's been compressed for too long. Clean, sharp, louder than I expected in that room. "You didn't mean to sort it out later," I said. "You kept it." Chloe lowered her phone for the first time in the meal. She looked at me, then at our father, and said nothing. But she didn't look away either. My grandfather's face had changed completely. The warmth, the pride, the open ease he carried like a second jacket, all of it was gone. What replaced it was something I had never seen on him before. A slow, comprehending fury. The kind that doesn't rush because it doesn't need to. "I wired that money directly to you, Daniel," he said. His voice had dropped. Not soft, low. The way a sky gets quiet before the weather changes. $70,000. The memo stated its purpose explicitly. Emma's condo purchase. $70,000. The number arrived in my chest like a physical object. $70,000. More than I had earned in 4 combined years of pre-dawn cleaning shifts and midnight tip money. Enough for a home. Enough for a start. Enough to change the entire shape of the last 4 years of my life. My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. "He told me to work harder." The table went very still. "He told me I was on my own," I continued. My hands were flat on the tablecloth, pressing down slightly as if to keep myself anchored to the room. "He told me no one would hand me anything. He watched me work 2 jobs for 4 years. I looked at my father, at this man I had spent my entire life trying to reach. And all that time, you were sitting on my future." My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraped loudly, a sound that was almost rude in that restaurant, and I was glad for it. Stood up and looked down at him. "You always said truth builds character," I said. "Guess I finally have some." I turned and walked out. The air outside was cold and gray. October-specific cold, the kind that threatens rain and withholds it. I stood on the sidewalk outside the Gilded Spoon with my arms crossed over my chest, staring at the parking lot, my heart hammering so fast I could feel it in my throat. Inside, through the plate glass window, our family was a still life, a portrait of aftermath. I heard the door open behind me, hurried footsteps. I tensed for my father or my mother's version of peacemaking. "Emma, let's just calm down. You're being dramatic." "Emma," my grandfather's voice, worn at the edges but steady underneath. He caught up to me, his hand finding my arm. He was out of breath. At 82, moving fast, cost something. His face had lost its color. "You really never got the apartment?" he asked. The question was so plain, so without artifice, that it broke something open in me. I shook my head. "I live in a basement," I said. "My closest roommate is a boiler." He looked at me for a long moment without speaking. Then his jaw set. "Show me," he said. That night, I drove him there. We barely spoke in the car. When we pulled up to Mrs. Gable's house, porch light out, ceramic owl visible in the dark window, narrow concrete steps descending along the side of the building to a door below ground level. He got out without being asked and followed me down. I unlocked the door, flipped the switch. The single bare bulb flickered. I watched him take in the room the way you watch someone see something that hurts them. Slowly, completely. The water-stained ceiling, the yellowed walls, the card table with the hot plate, the mattress on its frame pushed against the wall next to the laundry unit, the desk where I had kept my design portfolio in a folder I stopped opening about 2 years ago, the boiler's faint vibration humming through the wall beside it. No windows. He walked to the boiler wall and placed his palm flat against it. Then he turned to me. "He didn't just steal from you," he said. His voice was barely above a murmur, but it was the most certain thing I had ever heard. "He stole from both of us." I nodded because speaking around the knot in my throat wasn't possible. He stood in the center of my basement apartment in his good suit and looked like a man who had just discovered a structural failure in something he built himself, which, in a way, he had. His son, his foundation, all of it rotten. "Tomorrow," he said, the softness gone, something harder arriving in its place. "We're going to the bank." We were at the downtown branch of First National by 9:04 a.m. My grandfather had called ahead. The branch manager, a man named Howard Callahan, 15 years at First National, the kind of careful, measured professional who wore the same style of suit every day because it simplified decisions, met us at the door personally. The conference room was all dark wood and marble, the kind of room that exists specifically to make make numbers feel final. Howard sat behind a computer monitor and pulled up the records with the quiet efficiency of someone who already knew what they were going to find. "I located it this morning when you called, Arthur," he said. He typed, and the screen populated. "This is the incoming transfer." I leaned forward. June 12, 2021. Transfer from Arthur M. Reed to Daniel J. Reed. Amount $70,000. Memo. For Emma's condo purchase. There it was. My future. In black text on a white screen, with a date and a purpose and my name on it. Howard's fingers moved again. And this is what happened to it. June 17, 2021. Transfer from Daniel J. Reed checking account to Vanguard Private Investment. Account 7748. Amount $70,000. Bars. Memo. Initial investment. 5 days. I stared at the screen. 5 days between receiving a gift intended for his daughter and routing it into his own investment account. No hesitation. No record of internal conflict. Just a clean, efficient movement of money that had never been his to move. All those nights I ate instant noodles because my grocery budget was $40 a week. All those pre-dawn shifts. All those times Gerald the boiler woke me at 3 a.m. and I lay in the dark calculating whether I could afford a new pair of work shoes. My money was sitting in an account under his name, compounding. My grandfather's jaw was locked so tightly I could see the muscles working in his cheek. "Print everything, Howard," he said, voice flat and cold. "Certified copies. Every transaction." Howard Callahan, to his credit, asked no questions. He tapped the keys. The printer in the corner woke up. Pages slid out, one after another, clean and precise and devastating. My grandfather gathered the stack, squared the edges, and stood. "Let's go," he said. The drive to my parents' house took 22 minutes. I sat with the certified bank records on my lap and watched the neighborhoods change outside the window. The glass and steel of downtown, giving way to wide suburban streets, lined with mature trees and houses set back behind lawns that required maintenance. The kind of neighborhood that communicates stability. My grandfather had also, before we left the bank, made a call to Margaret Oyalarian, an attorney he had worked with for 30 years. Margaret Oyalarian, JD, University of Chicago Law, specializing in fraud and civil litigation. She had listened, asked 3 precise questions, and said she would have a document prepared by that afternoon. We pulled into my parents' driveway at 11:40 a.m. Chloe's SUV was parked near the garage. New, silver, bought with a co-signed lease my father arranged for her graduation present. The same year he told me the market wasn't right for my condo. My mother opened the front door before we reached it. She must have seen us from a window. Her face did the thing it always did when something threatened the surface calm she maintained. A flicker of controlled panic, quickly smoothed. "Arthur, Emma." Her eyes moved to the folder in my grandfather's hand and went still. "We weren't." "Come in." My father appeared behind her. Gall flows. The easy confidence of a weekend. It lasted exactly as long as it took him to register my grandfather's expression. "Dad," he started. "This really isn't." "Sit down, Daniel." 2 words. That was all. My father, the man who had never once in my memory obeyed anyone without at least the performance of authority, sat down. We followed him to the formal dining room, the one reserved for holidays. The long mahogany table reflected our faces like a dark mirror. My mother perched at the far end. Chloe appeared in the doorway, took one look at the room, and sat down without being asked. My grandfather placed the certified bank records on the table in front of my father. Not slid, placed, with the deliberate finality of a man setting down something permanent. "Transfer from my account to yours," he said. June 12, 2021. $70,000. Purpose stated Emma's condo. He tapped the second page. "Transfer from your account to your personal investment fund." June 17, 2021. $70,000. 5 days, Daniel. 5 days between receiving a gift for your daughter and pocketing it. My father stared at the documents. He did not touch them. My mother made a sound, not words, just a small, involuntary exhale of air, and placed her hand over her mouth. My father's mouth opened. The machinery of excuse-making engaged visibly, the way you watch someone search for footing on ice. "I was protecting the investment. The timing wasn't right to buy. I intended to give it to her when she's been living in a basement." My grandfather's voice landed in the room like something dropped from height. Total quiet. Then Chloe said from the doorway, in a voice I had never heard from her before, stripped of the comfortable dismissal she usually carried. "What?" I looked at my sister. Her phone was in her pocket. She was looking at me with an expression I did not immediately recognize on her face because I had never seen it directed at me. She was horrified. "She was working 2 jobs, I said. Not to Chloe, to the table, to the room, to no one specifically and everyone precisely. He told me I wasn't working hard enough. He told me to flip burgers. He said it would build character. My hands were pressing against the mahogany. He said those things to me while $70,000 of my money sat in his investment account. Chloe's face went through several things quickly. Then she looked at our father. "Dad," she said slowly, "is that true?" He said nothing, which was its own answer. My grandfather reached into his jacket pocket and placed one more document on the table. A single sheet of heavy cream paper, folded in thirds, bearing the letterhead of Margaret Oyalarian, attorney at law. "You have 2 choices," he said. His voice had gone quiet again, the low, dangerous kind of quiet. "I take this documentation to the district attorney. I press charges for fraud and misappropriation of funds. Margaret has already reviewed the evidence and confirms the case is straightforward. You will be arrested. You will lose your position at your firm. You will lose the professional reputation you have spent 30 years Sears building. I will testify against you. Emma will testify against you. My father had gone the color of old paper. Or, my grandfather continued, you accept the terms in that letter. My father picked it up. His hands were shaking, not the performance of emotion, but the genuine physical betrayal of a body under pressure. He read. I watched his face. It was the first time in my life I saw my father look small. What does it say? My mother's voice was barely audible. Full repayment, my grandfather answered. The original $70,000 plus 4 years of compound interest as calculated by my accountant, transferred into a trust for Emma within 6 months. He paused, and a written confession, to be read aloud at a family gathering, to everyone, every cousin, every aunt, every person who has spent the last 4 years watching this version of events. Chloe made a sound that might have been the beginning of a word, then stopped. My father set the letter down. He looked at me. For the first time, there was no performance in his face, no authority, no patience, no the real world is waiting wisdom, just a man sitting at his own dining room table caught. How much? He said quietly. Does Margaret Oyalaran charge per hour? More than you want to spend, my grandfather said, and she has already been retained. My father picked up a pen and signed. We returned to the Gilded Spoon the following Sunday. My grandfather had insisted. He said the truth needed to happen in the same place as the lie. I understood what he meant. Not revenge exactly. Completion, a closing of a particular loop. The family arrived in stages. My Aunt Patricia, my Uncle James, 3 cousins, 2 family friends who had known my parents since before I was born. They came in expecting the usual monthly gathering and found instead a table that had been rearranged, with me and my grandfather at the head. My father arrived last. He stopped in the entrance for a moment when he saw me sitting where I was sitting. Then he walked to his seat slowly and sat without speaking. When everyone had settled, my grandfather stood. He didn't tap his glass. He didn't need to. The room came to attention the way rooms do for people who carry real weight. Thank you all for coming, he began. 4 years ago, I gave my son Daniel a substantial sum of money. It was a gift for his daughter Emma to purchase an apartment after her college graduation so she could begin her adult life from a position of stability. The table had gone very quiet. My son did not use the money as intended. He transferred it to his own personal investment account within 5 days of receiving it. He then told Emma she had no family support and needed to make her own way entirely. He told me Emma was living happily in her new home. He paused. For 4 years, my granddaughter worked 2 jobs and lived in a basement. No windows, a boiler for company. Patricia looked at my father. Her expression moved through surprise, then recognition, then something harder. My grandfather reached into his jacket and placed a sheet of paper on the table in front of my father. Daniel, he said. My father picked up the paper. His hands were steadier than I expected, steadier than they had been at the dining room table, and I realized he had known this was coming and had prepared for it, which was, in its own strange way, the most dignity I had seen him show in the entire situation. He cleared his throat. I, Daniel Reed, admit that on June 12, 2021, I misappropriated $70,000 given to me in trust by my father, Arthur Reed, for the express purpose of purchasing a home for my daughter, Emma Reed. The room didn't move. I intentionally deceived my father by telling him the money had been used as intended. I intentionally deceived my daughter by withholding this gift and telling her she had no financial support from her family. I allowed her to struggle financially for 4 years while the money she was given sat in a personal investment account under my name. He paused. The restaurant noise from other tables continued distantly, oblivious. Somewhere behind us, a child laughed. A waiter passed with a tray. I told my daughter this struggle was necessary for her character. It was not. I orchestrated it for my own financial benefit, and I told myself stories about her independence and my patience that were designed to obscure what I had done. I am sorry. He set the paper down. The last 2 words, I am sorry, landed with less weight than everything that came before them, perhaps because they were the only part that came from him, rather than from a lawyer's document. But they landed. They were real. My Aunt Patricia had her hand pressed flat against her sternum, like someone checking for a heartbeat. Chloe was crying, silently, looking at the tablecloth. My mother sat with her hands in her lap and looked at her husband the way you look at something you thought you understood for 35 years and have just realized you were wrong about. My grandfather sat back down next to me. He didn't say anything. He picked up his water glass, touched it briefly to mine. A quiet thing, a private thing, and we sat together at the head of the table in the room where it all started. 3 months later, I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building downtown. It had windows, real ones, east-facing, which meant that in the mornings the light came in flat and gold and traveled slowly across the floor while I drank coffee. I did not own a boiler. I did not have a landlord who smoked Virginia Slims through the floorboards. I had a small kitchen with actual counter space and a bedroom where I could hear, when the window was cracked, the sounds of the street below. The trust was established by my grandfather's attorney, Reginald Park, 22 years in estate law, within the 6-month window specified in the agreement. The money arrived in installments as my father liquidated assets. I did not watch the process closely. My grandfather handled the accounting with his firm, and he sent me updates in the precise, factual emails of a man who had spent 50 years running a construction business and had no patience for imprecision. I opened my portfolio folder on my laptop for the first time in 2 years. On a Tuesday afternoon when the light was good, the work inside was better than I remembered, or maybe I was better at seeing it. I applied to 11 design firms over the following 6 weeks. 3 responded. 2 offered interviews. 1 One, a boutique studio called Alderson and Frame that specialized in small space residential design, offered me a position as a junior designer starting the first Monday of the following month. The salary was not large, but it was real work in my field, with daylight. The Sunday before my first day, my grandfather came for brunch. I had found a table at an estate sale. Solid oak, needed refinishing, which I did myself over 2 evenings with sandpaper and a can of walnut stain, and set it by the east window. I made eggs. We drank coffee. He sat across from me and looked around the apartment slowly, the light on the floor, the design books on the shelf I'd built from reclaimed wood, the portfolio open on the desk in the corner, the sketches pinned to a corkboard above it. Then he raised his coffee cup. "This," he said. His voice was thick in a way I had only heard from him once before, in a basement with no windows, standing next to a wall that vibrated. "This is exactly what I imagined." I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. "Me too, Grandpa," I said. "Me too. My father and I do not have a relationship. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. He repaid the money because a lawyer told him to, not because his conscience did, and I am not interested in pretending those are the same thing. My mother calls sometimes. There is a quality in her voice now, a hesitance, a carefulness that is new. I do not know yet what to do with it. Chloe took me to lunch last month and said, unprompted, 'I spent so many years thinking you were dramatic, and I'm ashamed of that.' She ordered my coffee before I arrived. Black, 1 sugar. I told her that was a start. The thing about being lied to for 4 years by someone who was supposed to protect you is that the anger has a long half-life. It does not disappear when the truth comes out. The truth is not a cure. It is more like a correct diagnosis. Necessary, clarifying, but not the same as healing. What heals you is the east light on a Tuesday morning, the smell of walnut stain on your hands, a table you refinished yourself, coffee across from someone who drove 3 hours just to raise a glass in your direction. My grandfather gave me a home before I was born, in every way that mattered. It just took 4 years, 1 dropped fork, and 1 very particular silence for me to finally receive it.